What's up, everybody? Derek Anderson, the DA, and this is my review of ISOM #1, the first comic book in the Rippaverse. Long-awaited Rippaverse. We've been waiting a long time for this book. Written by Eric July, of course. The artwork by Cliff Richards, and the coloring by Gabe Eltaeb. So how do I feel about this book? Well, first off, let me say this, that the presentation is spectacular. It's amazing. It's astounding, okay? This book is a nice, thick book, okay? And the pages are glossy, shiny. You know, the artwork is really well done as well. Everything about this book, 25% of any creative work, let me tell you, is the presentation, how it looks, how it comes off, right? It's kind of like how I say with the films, right? You know, 25% of my film scores when I do a review is sights and sounds. That's the presentation. That's the way it comes off to you as you look at it. And this book has some amazing looking artwork, and it's well constructed, thick, glossy pages, you know, so yeah, you feel like you're getting a quality piece of work. Now, let's go on and talk about the finer points of this particular first book. Starting off with characters, right? Now, I said this before, when it comes to animation, there are two components of character, okay? It's design and it's dialogue, okay? Those are the main two things, and that's what you're judging, okay? Now, in this book, I don't really have a problem necessarily with the design. You know, the costumes and the clothes, the look and design of each character is pretty good, okay? This concern comes with the dialogue, okay? It's how these guys are talking back and forth and how they're speaking to each other, okay? On my first read through, because I read it three times before I actually did this review. On my first read through, there were moments where it seemed a bit clunky, you know, and for some reason I couldn't put my finger on what it was that I didn't quite feel right about this. And immediately I said, well, it's not the words, okay? It can't be the words, so that doesn't seem like the problem. So then when I went back to my second read through, because again, I was thinking like the words are fine, but there's something wrong with maybe the delivery, and that's when it hit me, you know? It kind of covers itself throughout the entire book, because regardless of how these characters are supposed to act and what they're supposed to say, they're all sounding the same. You know, they kind of all speak in that same tone. They don't have their own unique voice or individuality, right? They're different characters, but they don't have their own individuality. It's like their words are really being spoken by the same person, which of course makes sense because Eric July is the person that's actually writing this particular story. So I get that. So what I did is I went back on my third read through, and I've listened to thousands and thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of Eric July videos. And I actually started to read the words in his voice, and lo and behold, that's what it was. I could literally hear his tone and in his inflections and everything, and that nailed it. If you read it through, like kind of imagining the words in Eric July's voice, the dialogue actually works a lot better, okay? You can actually hear the man, but that's a problem, okay? Because character voice is extremely important, because if people sound the same, nobody really sounds any different. You really don't have a conversational rhythm to the words that are on the page. It becomes like a monologue and not a dialogue. And I'm pretty sure that as a musician, Eric July understands, you know, rhythm, and it's really an easy fix. You know, what you need to do is just have a read through. You know, once you get your script together, you sit down with a bunch of your homies and you say, all right, let's just go ahead and do a read through, fellas. Everybody pick a voice, everybody pick a character, and we're just going to read through this. Somebody will be the narrator, and then you just kind of read through everything, and you record it, right? You record it, so then that way Ripper can go back, listen to it on the back end, and he'll hear things differently. It always comes off differently when you hear somebody else reading the work to you. You know, it'll come off differently in your ears, and then you go back and then you kind of patch things up. You know, that's what I would do. That would be my take. But in any case, that was character. I thought the dialogue at times was clunky, and in the end, it turns out basically to have the same kind of voice throughout. Next up is the plot. So the plot actually moves along pretty well. We get plenty of action. We get lots of reveals. So I thought that the plot was doing well. We get introduced to a lot of new characters, almost seemingly every other page. So there's always something interesting coming up next. You never know what's going to be coming around the corner, whether it's going to be a fight scene, whether you're going to be talking to his sister, whether you're going to be meeting somebody else, you know, always kind of flipping up the plot. So the plot reveals a lot. I will say this for ISOM #1 is that it is a smooth enough read through, okay? You're not going to be bothered, even with the clunky dialogue. You kind of get through it from a plot standpoint, all right? It doesn't take too long to get started. It kind of brings you right into the action. You get plenty of conflicts along the way that kind of help develop these characters out. So all of that stuff is good. And like I said, you get a definite sense of who these people are, notably ISOM. ISOM, you really kind of know who he is by the end of this particular story. And it does make that dialogue issue does kind of make some of the scenes also read clunky, but from a what happens next, what can we expect, it starts to uncover a lot of pieces to this particular puzzle, to this story. Works very well, okay? But because we get to meet a lot of people, and because I had to read through it a couple of times with the dialogue, and to kind of keep track of what's happening, who was who, what was going on, there are some plot threads that I'm sure will be explored at length at a later time, okay? There's a lot of stuff going on without a lot of storytelling, and I'll get to that in a moment. But again, for the first issue, I kind of get that, you know, you're establishing the story world, you're trying to letting the plot kind of guide you through these various little venues. Okay, we're gonna look at this guy over here working on his own business, we're gonna move over here talking to his sister and his niece, then we're going to come back to the club, then we're going to go to this situation. You know, it's kind of moving around, so I get it, but there's a lot of plot points that got to be unraveled and wrapped up, and it's a lot for a first issue when you don't know anything about anybody. All right, and then we get to the story. I know you guys are saying, well, you just got through talking about the plot, DA, so what are you talking about this story thing, right? Plot and story are completely different, all right? Plot is this happens, then that happens, okay? It's like the sequence of events, okay? The story is, what does all of this mean? What is this all about, right? Okay? If I were to kind of sum up his story in this first particular book, I would say it goes something like this. A young man with superpowers who has tried to escape his past, perhaps a troubled and dark one, begins an investigation into a missing woman and gets more than he bargained for. In order to resolve this issue, he has to resume his former life as a hero and take on various groups, from criminals to super cops to other superpowered individuals, etc., etc., etc. Okay? That's the story. All right? And then the plot is the sequence of events that spells the story out. All right? So what we have after this particular story is a bevy of questions with no answers. All right? Not yet, anyway. You know, again, that's what we would expect. I think most of it, again, it's super plot heavy for a first book. I think that the first book should be more or less establishing the characters. It establishes Icon pretty well, so you kind of know who he is as a person. But then you got like all of these other kind of, you know, wide array of characters, and we really don't get to know them necessarily. You know, we kind of get to know the Darren guy a little bit, but yeah, outside of that, not really, you know. So I think that that is an issue. And again, first issue, we can see that happening. But will he fix it by the next issue? That remains to be seen. But yeah, the story is probably like the most vague, murky thing that's going on. Like, I don't know what's happening here. You know, I can kind of see where this might be headed to or might be leading to, you know, but you dropped a lot of characters in here. We don't really have any idea of what's going on. All right, and then finally we get to the overall presentation, the artwork. Like I said at the very beginning, good cover, good, nice, glossy pages. The artwork throughout is really well done. Now, is it the best artwork in all of creation? No, I wouldn't say that, but it's high quality, okay? It is upper tier, at least, for sure, okay? So I'm not sure where people have been getting off about complaining about this artwork. This artwork is phenomenal, okay? Lettering, you know, looks good. Everything looks good. It's a good looking book. That's important, okay? I don't ever want to take anything away from the work that these other guys are doing. Otherwise, you just got a novel, okay? You just got a novel and you got a guy writing a novel. If you don't have the artwork that's behind it, the lettering, the art coloring, the art, all of that stuff is extremely important, and it looks good. And like I said, from a book perspective, it's thick, glossy pages, feels solid, feels well built. And that's what you want, especially. You don't want some little flimsy rag that's going to tear easily, okay? So for his first book, I think he did a phenomenal job. Now, I got questions, and I've kind of, you know, glossed over this thing a little bit, but this is all my spoilery type questions. So if you haven't read this book yet, you might want to go ahead and excuse yourself, because I'm about to get into a little bit of spoilers, okay? Number one is Jasmine. Who is she? What's her importance to this story? So far, I'm not feeling that. And she was the reason that ISOM gets involved from the beginning. So we're trying to figure out who she is and what she's all about. And we get a little bit about Jasmine and his conversations with his sister, but we don't get enough. That's one of the questions that I'm looking to see solved in the next book, okay? Who is Mrs. Newman to ISOM? That's the second one I want to know, besides Jasmine's mother, clearly. Who is Mrs. Newman, okay? Because it's Mrs. Newman's, it's his devotion to Mrs. Newman that thrusts him back into action. So what is their relationship like? Is it just like, all right, I got to throw myself, after all of these years of being out of the game, I'm going to throw myself back in here, and he cites Mrs. Newman on more than one occasion. So I'm interested to see who she is, if she's a character, if she's just somebody that kind of acts as this catalyst, but really shouldn't be a catalyst because you just left the life, man. What you trying to get back in it for? Mrs. Newman better be like the person that saved your life one time or something like that, you know? That's how I look at it in any way. Third person is Darren, this supposed villain, at least in regards to this Jasmine situation. I mean, at one point he seems like he's just a club owner, but at the same time, he's clearly hiding something. What is he hiding? What is that all about? Is it just some nefarious, you know, criminal business? Or is he dealing with something on a higher level? Because he's walking around with this other guy, which is the next question that I have. Santuan, who is that big, huge, you know, guy that they get into it with, you know, they call him the Accept. What's his history? It seems like he could be a potential friend or a potential foe or major foe throughout this thing. So I'm interested to see who he is. And then number 5, I think, is just that Accepts, which I think is short for exceptionals. These are kind of the super powered guys in this particular story, the guys with the superpower. So how is this thing a thing, right? Like, are they born this way? Are they created in a lab? Are they from another planet? What's going on? I think this explanation is very, very important to understand the story world that they've created. They got like some super powered cops too. I want to know how all of that stuff kind of works together. So, you know, is it, and it could just be, hey, you know, we just live in a world full of superheroes. Okay, not a problem. But I think that needed to be explained, at least in this first book. And we never got to that. So hopefully we get a little bit more explanation on the Accepts in the next book. But overall, I think it's a good book. I think it's a good kickoff. It does leave me wanting to know more, which is definitely the point of any first issue. But I think some patching up of the character dialogue would help. I think you got to go deeper into each character. There's a moment like when Santuan is fighting ISOM, right? And it's their second fight. Okay, and they're giving us like a lot of exposition in this part of the story. They're giving us a lot of character information, and that's good. We need some of that. We need actually more of that in this book. But it's just an exposition dump at this point, okay? And we need more of that, but we need less exposition dumping along the way, okay? Do it in a better way. Like, one way you could do it maybe is you get a cop who's a, you know, first day on the job, and he's like, hey man, what's up with all these accepts and everything? Oh, let me take you through it and talk to you and explain all of this stuff to you. So as we're learning it, as the cop is learning it in the story, sometimes you can do it that way. Or if this is just a world where just superheroes are just known and they exist, maybe you got to explain it to a little kid. Explain it to me like I'm 5, you know? Maybe that's what you have to do. Invested in characters, you know, am I invested in these characters? You know, why should I care about any of these characters? That's the first thing. And then second thing, am I invested in this story? What's going on? What are the stakes? Where is this thing leading? I think that's what ISOM number 2 needs to deliver. Anyway, let's go ahead and check out my little scoreboard I threw together for this first issue, and we'll see what's up. All right, folks, so there you have it. That's my scoreboard for these particular elements in this first issue of ISOM 1. Again, character, I thought that was solid, but we got to fix that dialogue. I thought the plot was pretty good, moved at a solid little pace, okay? But sometimes it was a little bit too much. I think the story right now is the weakest part because we just don't know what's happening yet. Didn't let us know what the stakes are, what's involved. We're just kind of left to figure that stuff out or wonder about that or guess about that. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's not good. It's kind of 50-50 here, so I left it at a 5.0. But I think the presentation is the best thing about this book, 100%. Really well constructed, artwork looks good, lettering, all of that kind of stuff fits perfectly. I give this an overall 6.5. That's kind of on the low end of my good scale. My good scale runs from a 6.5 to a 7 to a 7.5. That's kind of my good. 8, 9s, and 10s are all great. So yeah, I think that's where this particular book lands. If you guys have an opportunity to read Rippa's first comic book, ISOM number 1, give me your thoughts and your opinions in the comments below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.